Speaking of reviews, I've got my review of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands right now. I have been lost in this kooky world that Tiny Tina has crafted for us with her bunkers and badasses tabletop role-playing game. It's kind of like a side game or a different track of a video game in the Borderlands experience. We saw something like this with the pre-sequel, and we've seen the downloadable content which take the core idea, the looter-shooter kind of concept of Borderlands, and twist it and turn it into something interesting and fun in a slightly different direction, and that's exactly what's happening here. I was a bit surprised to find out how much Tiny Tina's Wonderlands feels like Borderlands. I was expecting there to be a little bit more of a change-up, a little bit more emphasis on melee combat and magical combat. And there is that in the game for sure. You have magical powers and magical abilities. It starts with picking your class, and you've got a bunch of different classes that you can choose from, as any sort of tabletop role-playing experience would be. And then you head out into the field, and you can be a magic user. You can have an emphasis on projectile weapons, or sort of combining everything, which is kind of cool. So you've got the Stab Macer, the Clawbringer. I chose to play as the Clawbringer. There's the Berserker, which is the melee character. I had a really fun time, but it took a while for the game to kind of find its groove, in my opinion. I basically had to put in like a good 7 hours, and then I was like, oh, okay, I kind of get this. One of the things that they've done to kind of differentiate this from the Borderlands experience is they've done this overworld map, which is, you know, this whole experience is about poking fun, and it's a tongue-in-cheek variation on a lot of classic role-playing video games, but also tabletop role-playing games, and the chatter is consistent and not always funny, but it's always done with a tremendous amount of energy, and humor in video games is very subjective, so you may love it. But the overworld kind of gives you these sections where you can go into, and then you can get into these sort of micro battles, and you will get a new assortment of loot and maybe a key to unlock an area that you can go back into. But the core experience is very Borderlands-like. You're going to get bombarded with beasts and monsters, and you're going to upgrade your weaponry, not by augmenting the weapons that you have currently, but by tossing them or selling them and finding new weapons, because that's what this game is all about. It's a tremendous amount of time inside of menus, just like every Borderlands game out there. But the core mechanics of getting into battle and doing some magic uses like lightning attacks or other elemental attacks like fire attacks or water attacks or whatever, that's always pretty damn cool. Sometimes they can be area effects, so you'll drop sort of a dome around the bad guys and lightning strikes will happen to them as they enter into that area. I did find that it got pretty hot and heated, like there were tons and tons of enemies on screen at times, and they come at you from every direction, so sometimes you're going to be dying and not knowing exactly why you're dying because somebody got you from way off in the distance or whatever. But of course, just like Borderlands, you can win your way back out into the field, and it does end up feeling like Borderlands, and that can, I think, stretch your patience with this title, especially if you maybe didn't love Borderlands 3, which I didn't love Borderlands 3, but every time I go back and play it, I appreciate a little bit more of the hooks of the gameplay. And that's kind of what I got out of playing Tiny Tina. I started to really just enjoy the groove of it. I tuned out on a lot of the dialogue because it's just so much, and they're working so hard. Wanda Sykes is in there. Ashley Birch plays Tiny Tina, and she's terrific. What an incredible performer. I love Will Arnett. He is sort of this dragon lord, the big bad boss that you're going to eventually encounter in the game, and he does some nefarious things in there. But everybody is kind of out joking each other and being a little bit silly with what they want to contribute to everything, but it's not like joke a minute. It's everybody's trying to like out clever each other, and that works to a degree. But one of the things about humor in video games is that when you're poking fun at all of it, and it pokes fun at sort of the real world of Dungeons and Dragons and how it can be kind of loopy and crazy to make stuff up on the fly, and that's what Tiny Tina is doing. She's kind of the dungeon master. When you're making fun of all of that stuff, I say this all the time, you have to be better than all of that stuff. You have to kind of elevate, and you have to be incredible. And it's not incredible. It's really good, and it's really tuned, but it's a side story. It's a side kind of take on everything, like this crazy pig-like tooth fairy that you'll encounter along the way. I mean, I had a smile on my face until I got into the menus. The menus started to really grate on me, just like they do in a lot of the Borderlands games. That's a big part of the experience, so you have to have patience for the menus, but you're constantly picking up weapons. There's millions of them, just like there are in every one of these games. And it does start to get a little tedious going in and deciding to call some junk or sell them or drop them because you found some new things, and you're constantly looking at the stats. I get that's part of the role-playing kind of vibe of this game, but also all of the other Borderlands games. It just started to get a little tedious. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Like, I would have a full inventory because your backpack isn't that large, and I'd have to drop a bunch of weapons, and then they would be cluttered all over the ground because I wanted to pick this other thing up, but I'd have to look at everything and see their stats pop up before I picked up the right thing, because, stuff is happening so quickly in this game. It's not like a turn-based experience. Everything is fast, and the enemies are all around you, and there's fireballs everywhere, and you're like, okay, well, I want to get this better axe. It's a pace breaker when you have to stop and look at all of your menus and change all of that stuff. It's a little bit better when you go into the automated stores, which are just like the other Borderlands games. There might be a little bit more steampunky in this title, but in the stores you can choose the daily deal, but you can also sell your stuff and make some more money and pick your goods a little bit better that way, and sort of do your inventory management there. Honestly, all I wish that was in this game to kind of differentiate it a little bit is just a button that automatically puts the best stuff onto your character, and maybe another button to get rid of all of the stuff below a certain level or something like that. I'm nitpicking because if you're into role-playing experiences and you know this about Borderlands, this is not going to be unfamiliar to you. You've been contending with this for a long time. I just kind of wish that, as we are in now, the new generation of Borderlands, after Borderlands 3 has been repositioned as a PS5 and Xbox Series X title, right? Because they did the upgrade for that, which was cool. I feel like the game minutia should have been upgraded a little bit more too. It does differentiate itself enough with the cosmetic kind of qualities, the visuals, the super crazy colors that you get. It's like because we're in Tiny Tina's imagination, and this idea that there's this queen butt stallion who is this magical horse that looks like she's out of My Little Pony or something like that. So there's these weird incongruencies which I really enjoy. But of course, you're going to be battling a lot of zombies and a lot of skeletons and goblins and vicious creatures, and they're going to come in an assortment of sizes and with better weaponry and better armor that you will eventually earn and use. There is a little bit of platform hopping and jumping and navigation that way. There's some circuitous levels where you have to kind of figure out where to go back to get to the boss, and also some invisible walls, and also the random encounters, and they're poking fun of random encounters that you get into on the overworld. The whole shtick there is that you have a small area and you've just got to kill everybody to a quota, and then you unlock the goodie that you're winning out of that random battle, and then you can progress forward. But that seems I don't know, a little superfluous, a little bit sort of added on, because the rest of the game is battles in bigger areas, and then as this interesting kind of side event, it's big battles in the small area. So there's a lot of rinse and repeat repetition. There's a lot of things that are definitely an acknowledgement and a throwback to all the Borderlands stuff that you've played before, and you'll see characters pop up that you recognize from previous Borderlands games, which is all fine. And I think that the mileage will vary on the humor and some of the creative choices with these games, and I think a big chunk of whether you're going to love this is how much you love tabletop RPGs and how much you love Borderlands. And I have loved Borderlands, but Borderlands 3 felt like a little bit like they were exhausting the formula for me. It didn't feel like that much of a reinvention or a revolution, and I feel like this one does a little more because of its unique take on its aesthetics and the characters and the world that it's crafted for us. and I appreciated it. I did enjoy this game a hell of a lot. I think it's a very solid game in the Borderlands pantheon. It just didn't shake it all up and change everything and put Borderlands in a completely different perspective. But it's damn solid. It's a very, very good time. And I know that one thing that I didn't do is I didn't play it online with friends, and that's where Borderlands really, really always succeeds, when you play this cooperatively. And I think that this game will also be an awesome time when you play it with other people. And honestly, it's not a small game. It's a large game. There's a lot to see, a lot to unlock, and there's DLC planned for this thing. One other thing too is that I've been playing a lot of Soulsborne type experiences, a lot of really tough, hack and slashers over the last little while, and this was a shooter which I wasn't really expecting. I thought it was going to lean more in the traditional role-playing sort of vein, and the only projectile stuff that I was going to do were magic attacks and maybe crossbows and stuff. But nope, you're getting submachine guns and rocket launchers and all the awesome Borderlands creative weapons that they always have. Variations on those themes, but it was different than a lot of the other stuff that I've been playing recently, so I enjoyed it because of that. So I think it's a very solid game for sure. It's not my favorite of the Borderlands games, but it's a very solid experience. I think there's going to be a lot for people to enjoy, especially if they love this franchise. I'm going to give Tiny Tina's Wonderlands an 8 out of 10.